There you go.
All right, now we are.
We are live now. Well, you caught John singing before the mics went live. That's funny. I hope they got that.
I hope so too. So.
Welcome, hello there. This is Through a Therapist's Eyes. We are live on YouTube every Thursdays for about 6:15. Give us a minute or two, and we will pop on. We are doing episode 280, Neil.
Oh my goodness!
Freaking 80, right? This has been a long time going. I'm kind of like to see that number rise up. So we're going to talk about how does mental health / therapy affect emotional intelligence. And so it's kind of an old school concept, but newly reintroduced to the public. I hear people talking about it. I thought we should do it on the show. So if you're finding us on this platform for the first time, this is before we turn the mics on live for the show that you hear on Spotify, Apple, all those places. We got John Pope here.
Hey, good to see you.
No Victoria, though, today.
Victoria,
Right?
the glorious.
That's the way she gets greeted every morning. She is, we got summer scheduling going on. You were out last week. She's out this week. I think I'm just going to take a month off. That's the way I feel. That is our introduction for YouTube. We're ready to fire up when Neil's done putting in the little skits and scats that he puts in for the show. How you doing, man?
I'm doing fine. We're just mid-year. It's going fast.
We're at July the 18th.
We're well over halfway through.
Oh, the summer?
Yeah, summer and the year.
Oh.
It'll be 2025.
Oh, my
And we
gosh.
can start singing In the Year 2025.
What song is that?
That was from Zingler and Evans in the year 2525. If man is still alive, if woman can survive.
Now I'm hearing that
Yeah.
song. Okay, I'm with you. I needed a little more that time. So, yeah, we ready? Oh, let me get my thing here. Wait a minute, something went wrong with my YouTube Live, actually, Neil. What happened there? We sure we're good?
Yeah, it looks fine to me.
Let me try to fire that back up. Okay, yeah, something.
Everything looks good.
Yep, something dusted off on mine. So, okay, ready to go. Hello, this is Through a Therapist's Eyes. John and I were just discussing how this is the mid-year, July the 18th. Middle of the summer, we're almost out, right, John?
Yes.
Ugh.
I mean, it'll be
Ugh.
2025.
We got storms firing off here out in the summer sun.
Lightning.
Did you avoid the bullets down coming from the sky?
Yes, I did.
They was dropping. So this is Through a Therapist's Eyes, where you get insights from a parental therapist directly in your home or personal time in your car, but not to delivery of therapy services in any way. We are going to be talking about emotional intelligence today. How does mental health and therapy affect emotional intelligence? So I got the book coming out. It is December 17th. Excited about that. Think that I'm going to do some events at bookstores and stuff. So take a minute to pay attention when that stuff comes out.
You'll have a bunch of groupies.
I mean, that would be cool, but they'll be coming to see you because hopefully you don't know this yet, but I'm hoping we can all get together and do some events and things.
Oh, I'd love
Yeah.
to.
Would you like that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Just like bookstores, and then we'll talk podcast stuff and, just do some different things. So tell them what these people are supposed to do. What is their job, John, on Apple podcasts and Spotify and these types of things? What are these people supposed to do?
We earnestly solicit your 5-star ratings, and it needs to be 5 stars, not 4 stars, but 5 stars, so that we will be like a bullet to the top of the.
Man, you were just really on point there. That was probably maybe the best you've ever done that.
Thank you.
That was well done. Contact at throughatherapisteyes.com is a way to contact us. I believe no new YouTube subscribers this week, although, Neil, you tell me that the numbers have gone up. You don't need to give an explanation. We're trying to figure
numbers are still going up. We're at 150.
Oh,
Yay.
Getting closer.
We need more. Tell your friends and family, seriously. We really do need subscribers on the YouTube channel. Find it on Through a Therapist's Eyes.
We're
Just click the
subscribers.
subscribe.
And
We are.
Yeah, and a lot of times it's a picture of you or a Victoria. I haven't popped up yet.
The shorts. That's not
Yeah.
true. You
Uh-huh.
have.
I have.
I think you
Okay.
have.
Oh, good.
At least the videos I've picked, it does.
Oh, thank you.
I don't know where they've gone.
I don't know. Well, I get notifications and I can see this little tiny head on and I see little Chris and little Victoria.
John, this is the human emotional experience which we do endeavor to figure out together. So let's get to it. This is, I feel like, well, what do you think about this topic when we're thinking about emotional intelligence? You've been doing therapy even longer than I have.
Well, I've been doing pastoral care and then therapy. Yeah.
Yeah, well, a lot of different things. But I feel like this is an old topic that went away.
Right.
That now I feel like people have awareness about their own emotional intelligence. Like it's a term that I hear people use. That's why I wanted to.
Well, I'm wondering if COVID and the isolation that happened during that time, that people did a lot of reflection and thinking
That
back
makes
then.
sense.
Yeah, it's actually
It does make
started
sense.
around 1965.
Yeah, you were busting off some facts there. What is that all about? Because I was in grad school or undergrad school at
well,
that time.
Yeah,
I just finished
95.
That was my
You weren't
graduation.
born yet.
Yes, I was
You were born in 65,
brother. I was. Let's not add any years to it. I was born in 73.
73.
Yes.
Right. So you're a young man.
Thank you.
But in 95, that's when Daniel Goleman actually came up with a book called Emotional Intelligence.
And is that the genesis of this
That's-
concept?
It's
Do you
the
think?
genesis, but it has its roots from around 65. And the reason why, and that came out of business, that sort of area in terms of leadership. And
Business
Goleman,
leadership, yeah.
and Goleman just kind of took it a lot further, and he tied it with your IQ, intelligence, and so that's where the EI comes from, emotional intelligence,
As opposed to IQ.
as opposed to IQ, and it's not IQ. It's not really tied to it, but there are
Yeah, it's totally different.
yeah. So I did a very quick geek outness, and
Oh, that's not just on the top of your head.
no.
Well,
So-
emotional intelligence. So the questions that we have is, what is emotional intelligence? Can we learn emotional intelligence, or is it more nurture, in the nature versus nurture argument? And can emotional intelligence be diminished or even destroyed? And I think that I'm really looking forward to, John, your thoughts about this and your extensive knowledge in working with people, because I think those are some pretty provocative questions, to be honest with you. And so let's get into what this thing is really the ability to recognize, understand, and manage our own emotions, as well as recognize, understand, and influence the emotions of others, which is an interesting caveat, influencing others in your emotional intelligence. That sounds devious, doesn't
Yeah.
it?
Manipulative.
Little manipulative.
But you see, there's something that keeps a high EI, emotional intelligence, from becoming manipulative.
Oh,
And it's-
explain that.
it's
So this isn't a
empathy.
devious thing. This is just a high emotional intelligence thing.
Yeah, it's high emotional intelligence is to be able to actually know what to say. I think it's like the old French word savoir-faire. To know what to do. And-
Savoir-faire.
Savoir-faire, and it's an old term. It's centuries old, obviously French.
I'm sorry, I gotta interrupt you. The YouTube comment. Hey, Cass, good to see you. She says emotional intelligence is the jumbo shrimp. It doesn't seem probable. That's a classic.
Well, I there are people with low emotional intelligence. The Three Stooges would be good examples of.
Those
that.
guys are brilliant. Don't
Yeah.
be fooled.
Oh,
Come on.
they're brilliant.
They
but,
are brilliant.
But they played
entertainers.
Stooges.
Yes, they
Just-
played the part well,
Yeah,
but their
they did.
emotional intelligence, I think, is stupid high.
Yeah.
Anyway, I interrupted you. Sorry for that.
No, I'm fine. I just.
Well, you were saying somewhat more about the origins. Like, what's the book? What do you recall from that?
There's
Like, how-
the
how did
book.
that come to
It was a
pass?
pop psychology book by David or Daniel Goleman, Golman, I think, or Golemon, and he talked about the competencies and skills that for people to be successful, and of course it gained traction in the business community for leadership, and so.
And I kind of recall that. That's when I was coming on the scene in the late 90s and early 2000s. It was big corporate consultations, probably the same thing that personality inventories took over for, all that sort of thing.
Right. And it gets associated with the big 5 personality traits is another thing for career counseling, that sort of thing. And I think it's another way of expressing personality traits that would be winsome or engaging and getting people to for leadership.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay, I was going to say something after you said it. I'm going to say what I was going to say, but I want you to really check me on this.
Okay.
Right? And maybe I'll pose it to you as a question. I think I'll do that. Is this a, well, simply put, is this a clinical term? You know what I mean by clinical term.
Yeah.
Do you think this is a clinical term?
Well, that's a criticism. It's pop psychology. Some people would say that, okay?
Right.
Do I think I think there's some measures now that have come out and assessment tools that would say that it is a legitimate area of study. And so I think you could use it as a clinical term.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Because I would say no.
Uh-huh.
I would say that it's definitely not pseudoscience.
Yeah.
But it's a concept that, with this definition, the ability to recognize, understand, and manage your own emotions. Like, this is an important concept. It's something that we want to be able to develop. We want to be able to have. We want to be able to execute in the moment when something's going on. When you get really good at this,
Human development. Developing as a
interesting
and a wholeness, but in terms of like, is this you were talking like a diagnosis or some
right? This is not any of that.
No, none of that.
None of that. I can't diagnose.
I can't even say an IQ test or anything of that sort. I mean, you. It's not something that you can necessarily measure objectively.
Okay, I love that you said that. I love that you said that, because I was thinking about this concept, and I began to think like, oh, can you test for levels of emotional intelligence, for instance? You see on the show notes I put, I don't know.
Yeah.
I didn't think so.
Yeah.
But I found these measures that you were talking about, and I'm skeptical about these things, dude. I'm probably going to piss off the psychologists and people who do psych testing, but I don't know. What kind of psychological testing do we have for emotional intelligence?
Yeah. Well, I knew one of the psychologists that developed
I just pissed him off.
No, he's gone to his reward, eternal reward. His name was Darwin Nelson, of all things.
Oh, you mentioned his name.
Yeah. And he came up with a measure, and actually, I was one of his guinea pigs.
I am fascinated right now. You must tell this story.
No, he came in and.
And who is he, first off?
Darwin Nelson is a psychologist, or was a psychologist, and he taught at Texas A&M in Corpus Christi, Texas. No, Texas A&M in Kingsville, Texas, which is down the road from Corpus Christi, Texas.
Cool. And he's a notable person in this area?
Yes, he was a notable person.
Okay. And he developed a psychological testing tool
for it, yes.
All right. And you gave it to you.
He gave it to me and a whole bunch of other students, and this was a few years ago. And
just a few years ago?
Well, yeah, over 20 years ago, yeah.
John, brother.
Yeah.
That's a long time ago.
Oh, okay.
I know when you put it in the pool of all the other years, it may be,
I'm
just
reeling in the years.
You are, brother. Okay,
Yeah.
what happened with this test? Tell us the
Well,
story of the test.
the test. Well, we had to score it and all of that, and so he had these domains, which I think Goldman has. Do you have the Goldman domains? Do you familiar with those?
I
Self-awareness,
am not sure.
self-management, social awareness, and relationship management.
Say again?
Self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship management.
Okay, I had self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skills, which
Okay.
even to me, lends
I have
inconsistencies to.
empathy too.
Yeah.
So social awareness, empathy would be under that, and but that would be organizational awareness. So let's say somebody is a high functioning ASD1, autism spectrum disorder 1.
Right.
That person would have difficulty with emotional intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
And so Sheldon on the Big Bang Theory probably would not rate very high in this.
Right, we know he wouldn't.
Yeah, we know he wouldn't. All those guys wouldn't.
Probably his roommates
Yeah.
too. Yes.
Yeah, but so that would measure, and so Nelson's measure, and I'm not quite sure the name of it because it's been over 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
Nelson and Lowe's measures probably would show that there's a way that you can test for it.
What's interesting in looking at this, I'll just interlude. Maybe one of these is his. It just came from ChatGPT because I really didn't know there were specific psychological tests for emotional intelligence. By the way, if you're listening, there's a reason why I wanted to spend a little bit of time on the testing. So we'll land in a good place with that. But ChatGPT had the emotional quotient inventory, the May Salvo Caruso EI test. I'm sure that wasn't Nelson. Emotional and social competency inventory, the trait EI questionnaire, and the workplace EI profile. EI stands for emotional intelligence. That doesn't sound like any of his.
No, it doesn't. But I mean, he was in his own. He was more in terms of careers and that area of counseling psychology. So,
okay.
But
so you're gonna tell us your score?
I scored pretty high.
You scored pretty high. Okay,
Yeah,
of course.
I did.
I'm not surprised.
I did. But emotional regulation, I had a little
little hiccup.
Little hiccup. So
most of us do, brother.
yeah, what I'm thinking, there's terms in assessments that test for validity and also for reliability, and so you can make an assessment or some sort of a test that could be both valid and reliable and still not be but it may not necessarily mean that what you're testing for is true. It could be.
Okay, help me understand that because I'm struggling with that.
Okay.
Yeah, reliability is a factor in studies in academia.
And validity
where
is does it
measure what it's supposed to be measuring?
Right.
Validity. Reliability is can it be replicated
over and over and over
Right.
again?
So
and
that's
then
a
there's
standard part of
but
studies.
there's a third part is that actually is this a thing? Is it something that really is legitimate?
Okay. Well, that's where I'm probably going to have my biggest problem.
And I think that's probably where you're stuck.
I think so.
This. I'm not advocating for it. I just think it's just another way of looking at things.
Okay. So you knew that there was testing and such for all of this. Can we test for it? I guess the answer is yes. I think the reason why, honestly, I didn't even know that this was testable, and here's why I spent a little bit of time.
As long as it's not detestable.
True. That's a joke, right?
That's a joke. That's a joke.
Just want to make sure, because I had I had a partner in the field that did excellent I feel like he was the creme de la creme when it comes to psych testing. And real quick, psychological testing is objective tests where in our state you have to be a doctor's level psychologist to be able to deliver them. Do you do any psych testing? You never did get into
Yes.
that, did you?
Well, yes, I did a little bit.
John, we need
But-
to talk.
Okay.
We need to talk. We need to get you.
No,
buzzed up
I'm
on it.
allowed. I'm allowed.
We need to get you doing this.
Okay. All right.
That's my point.
All right. I'm teaching it this, I've been teaching it.
Dude, we need to talk. You
Okay.
need to do some psychological testing because it's really, really cool. And I saw the creme de la creme of somebody who did those
Yeah, I'm not.
testings.
I'm
Yeah, I understand. You start out with a diagnostic interview, and then you go to objective tests. Usually the IQ test, which is a real thing, and it's a reliable measure. And then you go into objective tests, depending upon where the interviewer is thinking diagnostically makes sense. And there are a plethora of tests, like that. The Rorschach test. You listening may
That's a
remember.
projective test.
Huh?
That's a projective test.
Right. There's
So it's not.
Well,
it's
We don't need to get in that much of
Yeah.
the weeds. Yeah, there's objective and projective, I guess, and different. There are a lot of testing. That's all I want to go to really get at confirming diagnosis. When I used psychological testing, it was an interesting case because I was diagnostically confused, having a hard time trying to figure out what's going on, and the emotional intelligence was the least factor that we were worried about
Yeah.
trying to figure out. So I think that's why I really just haven't come across to that.
yeah.
You
So
know?
you're kind of you're. I think the thing is what you're saying is you want something that's kind of like a gold standard or something. If there's a test.
Yeah,
an evaluation.
probably. I think so.
But-
Because
but-
again, the concept of emotional intelligence is, I don't really see as a real clinical term exactly per se.
Yeah,
You know,
I'm not big on it either. I like emotional intelligence as a concept. but-
right. That
but-
we work with.
Yeah, but I mean I work with all of folks that you would say would be low EI. That sounds like you're making an IQ thing. If somebody has low EI,
Right.
I have a problem with that
Right.
because that's not taking the client or your patient as somebody that. Because the problem is if it's a low IQ, you really can't increase that. I mean,
You cannot increase your intelligence quotient. You cannot learn very much your intelligence
and
quotient.
emotion, and this is something that can be learned. It can be caught. It can be taught. It can be,
The answer to the question is, can we learn emotional intelligence, or is it more the nurture versus nature argument? This is not locked in by nature. This is nurture, your social relationships, your progression through life, your investment in improving yourself. There's a lot of upward mobility here, which is, again, why I'm kind of like, it's not exactly a clinical thing. It's a conglomeration of clinical skills. I mean, look at as we get into understanding these components, right? You had 5 different pillars. What were they again?
Self-awareness, self-regulation, social skill or social awareness, and motivation. Relationship management would be another one.
Okay, the relationship management one is the one that I got kind of messed up with a little bit.
Yeah.
Because
That's a business.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
the business application. I agree. I see that. But I mean, these are things about, these are the core components of what, when you drill down underneath the emotional intelligence label, what you are talking about, am I correct to say, John, are these core components. Let's look at them closely for a moment. So when we're talking about EI, we're saying, how self-aware are you? Right? How many times do you ask a client the question, hey, how do you feel? And get the response, I don't know. Good. Right?
Yeah.
Your face.
Yeah.
You got to look on the YouTube. You'll
Yeah.
see John's face gives it away. That happens all the time,
Yeah,
right?
it does, yeah.
All the time.
I had a client this morning.
Today.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, go ahead.
But I should be asking the right questions in good counseling in psychotherapy.
Why did you not ask the right question?
Well, how you feel.
Oh, okay,
So-
yeah.
So how do you go deeper? So, but then they describe it, and he said, meh,
Meh.
meh.
That's what he said?
That's what he said.
I mean, honestly, it's a tough thing to really be self-aware. You have to put concerted effort into who goes around thinking like, hey, how am I feeling today? How am I feeling now? You know, I told Neil when he got here, my stomach was upset. So we think of our physical ailment. We think of, I have a headache, or my muscles are sore, or I worked out hard yesterday, you know, what have you. We do not think like that even on that level on our emotional scale. Would you agree with that,
I
generally?
agree with that.
We just go around experiencing things. And so self-awareness is a core component of this, which is difficult. That's not easy.
It's sort of like a depth psychology thing, the self-awareness. In
Oh,
other
yeah.
words, the idea we're going to undergo years of psychoanalysis to be able to find out what we're doing, you know,
Behavior and
Behavior and-
practices and patterns.
and my existential background, that's a big component. But I've thought about this, and I've undergone therapy myself, and read and discussed
Worked
things.
on it.
Worked on it. It takes work.
Developed it.
Developed it.
And practice.
Yeah.
When you get better. Self-regulation is another one of these. I mean, you know, the components of emotional intelligence, it's a fancy way of saying deal with your crap, right? Identify what your emotion is, self-awareness, and then how much able are you to regulate your mood, your feelings, regulate, meanings manage.
Yeah.
Are people...
Interestingly enough, that same client talked about how he grew up and he had an explosive temper,
Okay.
and over the years he's kind of learned
how
to get along,
regulate
and regulate,
Yeah.
and not explode.
Perfect.
Not be Katie Kaboom.
Right. Motivation. You had you had motivation in there.
Yeah, I did.
You know, motivation, that's a little bit of a different thing. I mean, you work on this, you manage this, you do goal setting, you can kind of influence your own motivation. But we're going to be talking about mental health here, impacts on this, and that's probably a big central area where you got to be like, yeah, I can really take a hit. But empathy, can you learn empathy? I mean, when we're talking about the core components of emotional intelligence, do you practice and learn how to empathize with other people?
Good example is the environment that J.D. Vance, who's the new and we're
New
not
elect as of last night,
candidate,
vice president for the United States. Yes,
candidate. Yeah, he came up from actually it was Ohio, Appalachia.
I'm
but,
mad at him though. By the way,
Yeah,
very angry.
yeah.
He mentioned Pennsylvania. He mentioned Wisconsin. He mentioned Ohio.
Didn't
He
mention
did
West
not.
Virginia.
You're right. Say it.
West by God, Virginia.
He didn't mention us, man.
No,
we
he did
rule
not.
Appalachia. Are you kidding
Yeah.
me? How are you going to leave
You're
Kentucky?
all Appalachia,
Right? How are you going to keep Kentucky and West Virginia out of an
Yeah.
Appalachian
Yeah.
culture conversation? But anyway.
But my point is that he grew up in an environment where there was drug abuse. And he wrote this hillbilly elegy, and you get
Oh,
the
yeah.
mindset and all of that.
Yeah.
And then his grandmother took him and kind of gave him some skills.
Yeah.
And then he joined, by gosh, the wonderful branch called the Marines.
Hoorah, right?
Naval Services, Maritime Services,
Yep.
and he had a gunnery sergeant that told him how to spit polish his shoes and not do something stupid.
He learned a lot.
He learned a lot. So
Motivation, empathy, social skills. Yeah, thank you for
and
that.
he learned
That's
that. He learned that in the Marines.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's an excellent example.
Yeah.
I love that you brought that up because, you really you have a chance at any given point throughout your life. Listen, if you're listening to this and you're wondering about emotional intelligence, please know that at any point throughout your life, you absolutely, you the listener listening to this, have the opportunity to improve your emotional intelligence if you put a little effort into these 5 core components. John, would you agree with that?
I definitely would be. And I think
Right.
so in a way there's kind of values that are involved in this or not.
Are you asking me?
Yeah, I'm asking you.
Values. Okay.
Yeah, in other words, wouldn't you say self-regulation is a value?
A value. I'm thinking kind of not in the front end.
Uh-huh.
I guess we value these skills.
Yeah.
It's a valuable thing to have, but morals and the moral code, a moral compass,
Uh-huh.
your values.
That's not
I
part
wouldn't
of
have thought, but
Yeah.
you're obviously going to tell me why I'm wrong.
No, I'm not going to tell you that you're wrong because I live in my EI has taught me that I need to value other people's
Stop it.
thoughts. And
Well, tell me, I'm curious. Do you feel like it's a part of your value system?
yeah, I think emotional. I think it's part of my tradition. Of the Judeo-Christian tradition that was not rigid, and we were open. And
Boy, that
so
stumps me a little bit, man. Because I mean, when you look at clinical
that's learned.
terms,
You learn.
it is learned. I mean, but I guess my point is I can see where it might be a part of your moral compass and your value system, but that is not like much any other clinical
Mhm.
characteristic or symptomology or a lot of the stuff we deal with in
Mhm.
the mental health realm. Would you agree to that? Like
What do you mean?
depression or diagnostics or characteristics of
But I was
syndromes.
working under the impression that this really isn't a diagnostic thing. EI. It's something that it's not something you can. It's not in the realm of. It can affect your mental health, and it can help your mental health, but I don't think it's something that you could classify alongside with depression. I think if you have good EI, let's say emotional intelligence, that you're going to less likely develop deep depression or
Oh,
okay.
now that's a bold statement.
Because
Yeah.
they're guardrails.
Right.
So in other words, you don't fall off the off the
Cliff.
road, off
Yeah.
the cliff or into the shoulder. So you're able to
Even with conditions.
yeah, even with conditions. Just Abraham Lincoln's a good example of someone with tremendous, or Winston Churchill, tremendous depression.
If you're going through hell, then keep
Yeah.
going. My
Yeah,
favorite quote,
yeah,
Winston Churchill.
exactly.
Well, you stumped me with the values thing, but that's cool. Let's move on. It's a good transition, John, to a segment on really how does mental health affect this concept of emotional intelligence, different and specific sort of symptom sets or diagnostic sets. The things that we work with day in and day out. How does mental health affect your level of emotional intelligence? Let's just say anxiety, for instance.
Uh-huh.
All right, let's start there. I think anxiety is going to affect your experience of day-to-day life, which dramatically, if you have an anxiety condition, is going to affect your EI.
Okay. Well, I'm going to agree with you on this because I think your anxiety can derail you
Right.
quite a bit and immobilize you.
Yeah.
But let's say someone with tools that are EI, so as opposed to a diagnostic criteria or domain, it would actually be something that would be a tool that would help you deal and work through your anxiety. And so, in other words, there's a part of it is that you would say tenaciousness, for example, that despite your anxiety, you go ahead and you act. You're not frozen.
I know we're jumping around here, but I think I just figured out my stumbling a little bit with the
Uh-huh.
testing. Most psychological testing, would you agree, is, and when we do testing, it's really to figure out what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's my understanding of the main purpose of psychological testing.
Mm-hmm.
What's going on with your IQ? What's going on with your diagnostics? What's going on with your symptoms?
Mm-hmm.
Well, when you test for EI, I don't know that you're really finding out what's going on with you. You're getting a status check.
Mhm.
So it would be kind of cool to take an EI psychological test at the beginning of therapy and then at the end of
Do you want me
therapy
to
as a
develop
tool.
one?
Do it, brother.
I'd like to develop a tool for that.
But
yeah.
that, well, I'm wondering if those tools that we mentioned is
Uh-huh.
basically that's a best use for those
Yeah.
tools, because I don't think that you're going to explore your level of current EI and find much from it other than, hey, I need to kind of, improve my abilities on these core
Uh-huh.
components,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I think that's where I'm stumbling with.
Yeah.
Can you really test for this?
Yeah, it's kind of a amorphous thing. It's like growth edges. When I said guardrails, for example, it's not anything that you like with Beck anxiety inventory or or depression inventory or
there's so many of
or
them.
the MDQ or something, which
Those are all psych test tools.
psych test tools. I'm sorry, but with the EI, it's sort of like kind of amorphous. They're not rigid,
It's wide open.
wide open. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so too. So anxiety, yeah, I mean, think about it. If you have OCD, you have a very driven compulsion to do a behavior, touching behavior, rubbing behavior, cleaning behavior,
Clicking lights on
clicking,
and
right,
off.
light.
Yeah. Checking
Or
stoves.
an obsession on a thought. You
Uh-huh.
can't get out of your mind.
Obsessing
it comes
thoughts,
and
yeah.
comes and comes. That's going to influence your ability to self-regulate,
Uh-huh.
to be motivated, to empathize with other people. A lot of anxiety conditions have vast arrays of irritability.
So let me ask you this. Do you think if you had a standard and you had this EI and you said, well, I must not be very emotionally intelligent because I have OCD and I can't,
I see where you're going.
do you see where I'm going?
Yeah. The answer to that is no, you can. You can
Yeah.
improve.
Yeah.
You can still learn how to manage OCD.
Mhm.
Is that what you're asking about?
Yeah,
Is that
that's
what
what
you're saying?
I'm
Like,
asking.
absolutely. That's
Yeah.
our whole field, John.
Yeah, I know.
That's our whole deal.
I was setting you up for
I know.
for a home
yeah,
run.
I mean, understand
Yeah.
that these conditions that you might have are whole deal and we'll talk about, what happens in therapy, with emotional
Mhm.
health and emotional intelligence. Well, hopefully it's improving if we're doing our freaking job, right? But let's
Right.
move on and looking a little closely. Depression, I mentioned that with motivation. Well, one of the direct symptomology sets of depression is your motivation goes in the tank.
You don't have the energy. You can't even get out of bed in a
Interesting
very severe,
things are
yeah.
not interesting. You're stuck. You're hopeless, helpless. Your dark cloud is just overwhelming you. You
Yeah.
think that's going to affect EI?
Yeah.
Yeah, a
It's
lot.
going to bottom out.
It's going to bottom out if you're not careful. How about just regular stress, John?
Mhm.
Do people handle their emotions well or identify how they're feeling when they're stressed the hell out?
No.
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 So your
Yeah.
emotional intelligence, you begin to get a sight with this, a understanding that it's kind of a moving target.
Mhm.
Can we say that emotional intelligence varies from day to day greatly?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to make that statement. From day to day, even moment to moment, when something happens, that was a terrible click. Boom. When something
No,
happens,
that's a wonderful clip.
that was much
Yeah.
better. Thank you. Your emotional intelligence can take a dive.
You can bottom out.
Think about your conversation with your spouse.
Mhm.
You get into a fight, you get into a disagreement, you get your emotions all into your feels, as the kids say nowadays. How is your emotional intelligence while you're battling out over a $10 bill at the grocery store?
Yeah, I'm wondering if part of it is sort of a rough measure to kind of get your ballast set back, and you can right the ship.
Oh, absolutely.
And so maybe
think
that's
so.
part of having
The goal.
A goal,
Part
but
of what our
not
goal
to
is.
equate that with a good thing or a bad thing. Just is
Awareness.
Awareness.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're
Yeah.
after awareness. Going down through this a little bit more. I mean, what do you think trauma and
Mhm.
or substance abuse affects emotional intelligence?
Oh, yeah, definitely on that because,
How?
well, trauma, for example, is let's say somebody they'll get stuck emotionally. They can't. When I work with people with PTSD, for example, they can't get past the they can't process the trauma that they've had. They
Get
just
stuck into trauma.
they keep stuck in it. They keep re-experiencing it,
Trauma
and that's
brain.
yeah,
It's terrible.
yeah,
It does lock people up. And substance
mhm,
abuse, to answer my
yeah.
own question, well, that's I don't know. This thought just came to me as I'm talking about it. Is it? What do you think, John? Is substance abuse issues the biggest hit on emotional intelligence than most other things in mental health? I don't know if I can say that. I'd have to think about
Uh-huh.
that. What do you
I
think?
don't know
Can
if
we
I could.
quantify it?
Yeah.
I mean, substance abuse hits a person
Well,
pretty hard in
substance
active
abuse,
addiction.
you get frozen emotionally. You're basically when you develop that addiction, at least in my mind,
Yeah.
is that that's if you're the younger you are, the harder it is to grow out.
Let's talk
And
about destroying emotional
yeah,
intelligence.
yeah,
I'd need to think about it, so don't write into me and whatever.
uh-huh.
But I think I feel somewhat comfortable without thinking about it, just being impulsive in the moment. That substance abuse
That's
more
emotional regulation there.
more than
Yeah,
anything in mental health probably destroys emotional intelligence.
right.
I think I can make a case for that.
Yeah. Just think about in terms of your everything that you value sometimes in
It's
terms of
gone
is gone. You would steal. You would
from your grandmother,
your grandmother.
and that's not you.
Yeah.
That's the effect of active addiction.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's crazy. Personality issues, I thought was an interesting one.
Yeah.
We don't understand personality disorders quite
Yeah.
so much. I have the theory that I believe that is an effect of a poorly functioning endocrine system,
Uh-huh.
your hormones and neurology, body chemistry. I feel like that probably pretty close to substance abuse really affects your ability
Uh-huh.
to exercise and grow emotional intelligence. Sound fair?
Sounds fair. I'm also thinking in terms of something that really there's a lack of study in this area,
Oh,
and I
it's
think you're
hugely
kind
lacked.
of and yet we have talked so much about psychological and motivations and that sort of thing. We don't, but we very rarely have dealt with the endocrine system as a
Right.
is
And we know because of the thyroid, it
yeah,
dramatically affects mental
yeah,
health, right? So,
yeah.
and last, if we take a quick immediate or a quick specific look at bipolar issues, we just did a show on bipolar not too long ago.
Yeah, it was a couple of months ago, wasn't it?
I think it was a few weeks ago,
A
but I
few
lose
weeks ago.
time.
Okay.
I mean,
But it's going so fast, you see. That's
July the 18th. When you're manic and or your mood
oh,
dips to
that was a few
depression,
weeks ago. Yeah.
yeah, it was. Thought so. I mean, it's hard to be
Yeah.
empathetic. It's
Uh-huh.
hard to socially engage very well. It's hard to be
It's
very
hard to
aware of your
listen.
emotions.
It's hard to listen.
It's hard to listen when
Yeah.
you're manic.
Yeah.
Right. So the impact of these specific things, we just went through a few of our field's, mental health conditions, dramatically impacts.
Mm-hmm.
But again, we'll highlight even in those conditions, you develop those guardrails John's talking about
Mm-hmm.
to increase and to learn your emotional intelligence, your ability to be self aware, your ability to self regulate, your ability to motivate yourself and have empathy and social skills and relate to others. Those can improve in the context of what it is that you're trying to manage.
Exactly. I think that's true. So that might be the EI or the emotional ability uh,
Right.
to be able to improve gradually and substantially. So, for example, what happened to former President Trump? You were saying earlier that hoping that would be a real Am I doing the wrong thing?
No, you're fine. I'm looking at my notes to see where I pointed that out. I wanted to use that as an example.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll do
He
that
hasn't
now,
given a
John.
speech yet, so we don't know if he's grown. But
Right.
yeah,
Go ahead.
post-traumatic growth in
Go ahead with
terms
what
of
you were
that
saying.
is that
And of course, the listening audience, I'm sure, knows, the assassination attempt. We're about 5 days post.
very
that
thankful, and that's
Oh, my
still in the
gosh.
news, and it's
It's
so much.
it's going to be in our nation and world's history forever. Yeah.
And so that's a great opportunity for him, I think, to develop some further emotional intelligence. Same for President Biden, because of his the pressure for him having to deal with the infirmities of old age, and so that's going to be a strong point of growth, and this is not meant to be a political thing at all.
No,
So-
it's an emotional mental health fact, and I have no problem talking about it. I just found it in my notes. We want to end up here at a little segment of looking at practical tips, like how do you really develop emotional intelligence. Well, one of my brainstorms with that is dramatic life events. Dramatic and traumatic life events tend to be when you grow the most. This is why I really enjoyed doing crisis work early on in my career, John. We connected on that
Right.
a while ago. You were like part of the initial group to start crisis units, mobile crisis teams.
Right.
And I thought that was fantastic.
I was in West Virginia, of
Yeah,
all
well-
places, my first church.
Is that right?
That's exactly right.
I love
was-
that because we had a whole grant program and I was able to work on the mobile crisis team. And I loved that because I was able to meet with people right in the moments when they were in a dramatic or traumatic life event, and I could really make an impact because there's an indelible ability to imprint, can we say, emotional intelligence, core components into
I
that
like
situation.
that. I like that because during the time in which a person is maybe off balance the most,
Way.
gets the person
Open.
open and to be able to say, okay, I'm making a significant life change.
Right. So I made a note to myself to talk about the Trump assassination and the speech to be delivered exactly today. Here in a few hours, I'm going to race home because I want to check out his delivery, his presentation, his contrition, his humility. We can look at the 5 core things. What has happened might we observe with his self-awareness, his self-regulation, the motivation we know is high for Trump for sure, his empathy skills, his social skills. Those are things that in a traumatic event, you develop the ability to have them sort of almost imprinted because you're wide open. And I've heard that he has said, like, I'm just happy. I'm glad I'm alive.
Right.
Like that's you're quarter inch from a deadly event of a bullet flying through your head. I mean, that is, I don't know if you can get more
Well,
traumatic than
I
that.
think St. Paul is a good example of somebody. His name was Saul of Tarsus, and he was this is in Acts in the New Testament, but he was one of the persecutors of the early Christians. And
He was a good guy.
yeah, he was.
Turned into a good guy.
He turned into a good guy, but he was. I mean, he was ruthless, and he changed. Chuck Colson, another one, was one of Nixon's henchmen, and he made the statement. Did I say this earlier?
No, you did not.
Okay, he said that he would run over his own grandmother to get Nixon elected
Really?
in 1972.
Jeez.
Yeah, reelected.
All right.
Yeah, and he was involved with Watergate, and he was stonewalling and all that. He ended up going to prison, and he entered a man that was seeing his end, basically, of life as he knew it, and he was tough as nails, and he absolutely did a 180. I think that's emotional intelligence. That's growth.
I think it's right at the
It's,
freaking core
yeah,
of this.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so if you think it can't be developed, I'm just going to say you're wrong. Now, will it be people can also be in crisis and not have much development. That's
That's
also,
right.
unfortunately, true too. Probably true that you could have it wrecked a little bit too. That's I don't know. That's probably true too. So let's not get away from. Let's not get too far into what do we do to develop emotional intelligence. Helpful tips there, but what do we do in therapy? I literally have people saying, "I want to improve my emotional intelligence." Chris, how do we do that? And I'm like, okay, let's roll. That's the goal. So, how do you work with this in therapy? What do you do? What do you think the impacts like? What is therapy's influence off the cuff, John, on person's emotional intelligence?
Do you think motivational interviewing would be a good approach for this?
Well, you're gonna have to explain that. We can't geek out on core
I'm
strategies again. We've
sorry.
done that. We can't revisit that one, man. You listener, you're gonna have to listen back to the last show where John and I geeked out on strategies.
All right. So how do you do it? You connect it with persons. Maybe just why is the person having emotional turmoil? Why is the person having hurt? What's causing that hurt? It continues on. They keep doing it to themselves.
Right.
And so that would show their stuckness. Okay. So you would explore those areas
Right.
and say, okay, maybe you could do some exercises. You could do, I think you have down here journaling, for example, mindfulness.
Right.
I just gave somebody a mindfulness app.
Nice.
Yeah. Guy had PTSD, has PTSD, and from childhood, and he's wanting to say, I can't live like this anymore. I can't have these nightmares. I need to go on. I need to, and he's not been able to develop relationships. He wants to be able to date. He wants to be able to, in his words, be normal again.
Yeah.
Okay. Am I?
I think you're absolutely on point. I mean, this is something that we work with a lot, all throughout our therapy relationship. I was thinking about this, John, myself, on what do we do in therapy. I really like I should do some writings and whatever and create like a new model of therapy because I really enjoy the insight orientation, right? Any model that has, like you mentioned, motivational interviewing. I mean, there's levels of insight that are valued in particular models of therapy, and I generally find myself, drifted to those and oftentimes not even know it. Because when you come in a therapy experience with me, I want you to know and understand what's going on with your emotions, your feelings, your process.
Okay. This is a core counseling aspect, and that is
Right.
your genuineness and your openness, that you are a model as a therapist to be able for that person to remodel themselves. You're not saying you're better than they are or anything of that sort. But at the same time, it's that sense of unconditional regard or acceptedness
Right.
of the person.
Absolutely.
So in other words, that person, let's say, life has damaged them. They've been
Got hit.
traumatized, got hit. They've lost everything, and they want somebody that will accept them as they are without shame or guilt.
Right. And that's a hard thing to receive.
And I think, it's a hard and it's hard for some therapists, I think, that have some rigid notions and
True.
so they
That's
they
true.
get in the way of
That
the
potential
growth,
process,
the
yeah.
radical growth that could happen with a client.
Right. I feel your energy there. Yeah. It's absolutely. I think another thing that occurred to me, insofar as what happens in therapy is, isn't the self-regulation? That's a core component of EI we just established. Well, that's a core component of what we're trying to accomplish in a therapy experience.
Yeah, exactly.
How can you regulate what you're feeling?
Yeah.
And we walk through that. In couples counseling, how can you regulate what you're feeling as an individual while you're interacting with each other, right? That's a core piece of what we're aiming to accomplish. So I'm going to say that in those two ways alone, therapy is crucial for the development of emotional intelligence.
I was just thinking in terms of emotional intelligence in couples counseling in the couples themselves.
Yeah. Sometimes it's pretty low, John.
Yeah, sometimes it's pretty low, but you could actually build on strengths of emotional intelligence that, let's say, one person in the couple might have a higher emotional intelligence and let's say motivation, and another one might have more self-control or self-awareness or adaptability.
Adaptivity. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So there might be they can learn from each other and resonate and
you
build
learn the most when you struggle the most,
Yeah.
John. You know this.
Yeah.
Couples counseling, I love doing couples counseling because honestly, you learn
hard.
so much. It is hard. You
Yeah.
have to have a knack for it. But my
Mhm.
point is people struggle
Mhm.
in these intense emotions when you're engaged in these intense discussions with the person that's most close to you, which invariantly has the most ability because you have the most skin in the game to hurt you.
Mhm.
That's ironic. But you learn so much through that process
do.
and struggle. I mean, it's
You
a
do.
dynamic learning environment, if you ask me.
Yeah.
And that's directly what we do in therapy. Support, you were kind of talking on another thought that I had, John, about what happens in therapy for EI, support, validation, and direct confrontive feedback. I don't know how confrontive you are in therapy. Do you confront people pretty strong?
I tell them I confront them. So I think that's how I do it. Is, in other words, I want to confront you on this,
Right.
So, but it's always in a gentle way,
Right.
So
It's general touches, general pushes,
uh-huh.
Information, feedback.
Because as soon as you are, let's say, real forceful, that
Yeah.
person is going to get their back up.
You know what's always driven me nuts? I'm going to reveal this to the world. I probably shouldn't do this, but I'm going to do it anyway.
Uh-huh.
Traditional substance abuse therapy models.
Uh-huh.
You know where I'm going?
Yeah.
Oh, man. I've had some experiences in the field where it's just like, there was one experience I had where the other clinician was just, eyes bulging out, standing up over a person and confronting in a hardcore substance abuse, jam through the denial method. And it worked with the kid. The kid really got it.
So
it
it's
was
the
actually
DI,
good.
the drill instructor.
It was the DI.
That's not my
mode.
jam, though. It's not my jam.
That is not my jam either.
Yeah.
You got to have a special ability in that to get away with doing that function.
Yeah, it's what was the guy's name? Officer and a Gentleman, the DI in that one. He was very good actor. I think he was even nominated for an Academy Award.
Talking about you want us on that wall.
Yeah.
What's his name? Nick. What's his name? Is that the way you're talking about? A Few
Yeah.
Good Men?
No. That's the Officer and a Gentleman was a different one, but that was Jack Nicholson.
Jack Nicholson. Yeah.
No, that was kind of that was pernicious. But
well, before we run out of time, this always happens to us, which is why the review shows are good, because on the review show, I'll spend more time on these things. Practical tips, man. How do we accomplish the development? Hopefully we've convinced you a little bit that you can develop emotional intelligence. How do we really do this? I was brainstorming it and looking at lists and thinking through it. Mindfulness practices, tracking emotional realities, simply journaling, building through hard trials, empathy and social skills, marriage counseling, and dealing with your children and parenting. You have lots of ability to develop empathy there. The dramatic life events we talked about, actually learning something that you've probably heard, active listening skills, learning conflict resolution. It's actually classes that are taught. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just thinking about learning active listening skills, because that is also a way to develop empathy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
So, and to be able to do that without and learning conflict resolution skills, another one.
I'm curious about more of that. Can you tell me more about that?
Well,
See that active listening skill ability?
yeah. Thank you very much. Well, I think modeling, role playing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't do a lot of that in therapy, actually.
I did the empty chair.
Did you?
Yeah.
Congratulations. I want to give you a dap. I love
Thank
that.
you. Yeah. Yeah. I'm still learning.
We all are.
So, and it worked with this kid.
Yeah, a kid, no less.
Yeah. Well, he's a young adult. But,
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well,
but-
kid to you.
everybody's a kid to me now.
I
Okay.
know.
So and he went through a process of confronting his father, who was very abusive and possibly
Oh,
even
wow.
sexually abusive.
Wow.
And it helped him get unlocked.
And for those listening,
Emotionally.
empty chairs, when you take a figure or a theme or even an item and you kind of create some visualization, it's a technique in therapy, and you take a literal chair and you can move the chair in front of this person. That person will have a conversation with their item or their person or
And his father had committed suicide.
yeah.
And so that basically, he couldn't tell him.
The only way you could do it. Yeah.
The only way he could do it was to go through this process, and it unlocked him emotionally.
Yeah, I love that.
So
That's awesome. See, you really can. It's exciting that you can learn these things and setting goals for yourself and practicing them, actually writing them down. Anxiety, we talked about, influences your emotional intelligence. I love the specific skill of breaking things down into small pieces. I've spent entire sessions on helping people to actively break stuff down so that you don't have the big overwhelming picture.
I'll say this: my dissertation, it was such a big thing. I could not. I had this worse anxiety about how I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
And so something worked.
Broke it
and
down.
Broke it down. And so I geeked out on the research, which is my strong point. That's where I started.
Okay.
With the article review and the books and journals and doing that, and then being able to start at that point. And once I was able to do that, I did the second part.
I never did a dissertation, but I did write a book.
Same
and
process.
It's a very similar process, isn't
Yeah.
it? And I'll tell you, if you've ever done that and you start getting to completion of this thing, or you start considering, wait a minute, this is just not me in my little dimly lit room with my computer tapping on this thing. Like, somebody in the world is going to read this stuff.
Yeah.
That's intimidating. It's overwhelming.
Got to say this is that when I had people read my dissertation, and it was in other people's dissertations, and I'm going,
Oh, wow.
that freaked me out.
How cool, though.
Yeah.
That's awesome, John. That's a hell of an accomplishment.
But I mean, that's what you've experienced.
Well, I've never seen anybody quote my book. That would be pretty crazy.
Yeah.
That would be weird. You know, it's sad. I've never even seen my book, as the authors say, in the wild. I haven't seen my book in an actual bookstore. My stuff came out in COVID, and it just I don't know. That was a buzz. So hopefully in December we're going to get that done. All right, moving on. Depression, specifically improving your emotional intelligence by avoiding isolation, is the enemy number one to depression.
So the EI would be strategies that would help you get, and it maybe to be able to not just that one person, but
Purposely put yourself out there.
Yeah.
Even though you don't feel like it, knowing that you need that, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Bipolar personality disorders. I was struggling a little bit. I had to think about this in specificity to that. Really, that's where regulation skills I landed on come into mind. Like, how and what do you do to really regulate your emotions? There's a learning. Also, in therapy, there's a teaching modality I feel like we need to go into. I could spend an hour on that, but I want to honorably mention that. And then, I did actually said learn the 4 sections of my book. I nailed down all of these chapters that were therapy thoughts about the self, book number 1. And I think that, if you're really going to want to develop emotional intelligence, the 4 areas that I came to is, valuing yourself, meaning you appreciate, you build yourself up, be positive about yourself. Secondly, look at specifically the focus points, what you focus on. I talk a lot about in different chapters, you feel what you focus on the most. Thirdly, action points, taking action, being willing to, developing the ability to take action, I think is going to improve your emotional intelligence. And finally, reflecting, stopping and reflecting, allowing your emotions to be present rather than suppressing them, compressing them, that sort of thing.
Seems very similar to EI, and you did this before.
Bam.
Yeah, you did this several years before this topic.
What do you mean?
Well, you can. You basically you could go down this list, and it reflects emotional intelligence.
The 4 pieces of my book?
Yeah,
Value, self, focus points, action points, stop and reflect.
yeah.
That relates to self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, sales, social
There's
skills.
social skills too. I mean, motivation.
All right, on
Yeah.
point then, and
Yeah.
didn't know it. That's cool, John. I
Yeah.
did not. Yeah, I didn't realize that.
So Chris Gastick in his third book,
Who
Through a
knows?
Therapist's Eyes.
Volume 3 has got to
volume
be parenting and friendship, and then we'll go to these other things.
Okay. Emotion. Yeah.
Oh, good stuff. Well, thank you for being along this journey with us to figure out together, what emotional intelligence is, how it operates, and most importantly, a little bit on how do we build it, how do we grow it, how do we develop it, how do we nurture it, because there really is capability for you listening to this show to hang up with us and go research and learn and put some motivated energy towards how do I improve my emotional intelligence, because you can.
Yes.
Closing thoughts, John? Things
No,
we
I'd
missed?
just say absolutely. That's the truth. I think the self-compassion is so important, and to be able to and you may feel like you don't have emotional intelligence, but again, it's something that can be learned. It can be something that you can learn from others, and you can share it.
Love that.
Yes.
So, guys, take care. Stay well. We will see you next week.
Thank you.